Welcome to Healing the Trauma Within. In this session, I am speaking with Daphne Wells about making effective, empowered decisions. Let me tell you a little bit about Daphne. She is a professionally certified and credentialed business success and freedom coach and numerologist for heart-led entrepreneurs. She helps them get exactly what they want, which is more clients and more money, fast, without sacrificing themselves in the process. Through her juicy free gifts, life-changing coaching, her book, Decide, Choose Your Own Path, her masterminds, and intuitive strategic planning, Daphne is here to shake up your approach to business and life while making it all feel delightfully effortless. She delivers insanely powerful insights that give you radical permission to be who you were born as, and fulfill your purpose in the world. When she's not inspiring women around the globe, you'll find her creating magic with fabric and threads, getting her hands dirty growing what she eats, or frolicking in the waves. Welcome, Daphne.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm thrilled to be here.
I am so excited to have you here. Thank you so much. So we're going to talk about empowering decisions. What in the world is an empowering decision? Let's just start there.
An empowering decision is one that really is right for you. So we make a lot of decisions, particularly as women, that are for the benefit of all of those around us. And we end up missing out ourselves, and we end up losing ourselves in the process and not knowing who we are. When we're making effective, empowered decisions, we're doing it with what's right for us and what's right for everybody else. So it's for the greater good rather than for those around us and sacrificing ourselves.
Okay, that makes sense. So, the first thing that we all want to do is take care of everybody else and not take care of ourselves. So by being able to make these decisions just for us, that allows us to be more effective at taking care of other people.
Exactly. It's like the cup, if you talk about we give from our cup of love, our cup of care, our cup of whatever word you want to describe that as. And if that's empty, we're giving from the fumes. We need to be giving from the overflow, right? Rather than, and self-love, people who talk about self-love talk about that. And it works as making decisions as well. It's important that we're doing it from a place of overflow and giving rather than sacrificing ourselves.
And we have to make hundreds of decisions a day, or at least it feels like it. How do we go about making them so that they are empowered and coming from that place of love?
That's about knowing yourself really, really well. Knowing what your values and beliefs are really important. And for me, that's about not just values, not just being a word, but being an empowering sentence, a statement. So we actually can use that as a filter to make decisions. It's also about knowing who we were born as, and that's where numerology comes in for me, because we are born as complete beings. We're born as who we're intended to be in the world, what we're here for, the work we're here to do, the gifts we have to share, and yet we are conditioned and shaped by society into who they want us to be, who fits their mold. And so when we can come back to who we are and know our values really well, it becomes like a filter that we can just decisions just automatically run through it, and we come up with the right decision. It's a practice, it's a learned art, as everything else is in life, right? And you're right, we make a lot of decisions. In actual fact, our life is a series of choices and decisions we make.
Mm-hmm. It absolutely is.
Oftentimes when we're not, so an empowered decision also is one that we're aware we're making. We make a lot of decisions by default. We just do what everyone else wants, right? And that
we do what everybody else wants, what is expected of us, what we feel society and culture wants from us. So it's almost like we're living somebody else's life sometimes.
Yeah,
and we're not living our own. So empowered decisions would come from being present and living in now as opposed to living in the past or living in the future, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so how do we get to know who it is that we were born as? So I think, I read that in your bio, and I think that is so important because it is a big part of making the right decisions, making empowered decisions, is knowing who we are. But how do we find out who we were born as?
So who we were born as is we can calculate that using numerology. So numerology is a mix of science and magic, really. It's the science of the numbers from our birth date that calculates, and there are layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of that we can really go down into what makes us the unique individual that we are. And the more we know ourselves, that gets really back to who we were born as, not who we were conditioned to be, right? And when I did this work myself, I realized that most of who I was born as was squashed as a child because it didn't fit in the family mold, in this community mold that I grew up in. I was like the town freak, the odd person out, the black sheep.
Right.
And which was obviously part of who I was born as, because on some level I chose to be born there, right? And so once I knew who I was born as and who I am here to be, it's like, there's no one can tell me who to be anymore. This is who I am. And it feels natural and it feels right. And it's the confidence boost that you get from knowing who I am. This is who I am destined to be. We don't have to create that. We don't have to make it up. It's inside of us. It's about refinding it and claiming it.
I am really fascinated with numerology, astrology, all of that good, interesting stuff. That's a whole nother topic. But
yeah, that's not what we're here to discuss today. It's so
I could really go down that rabbit hole.
Oh yeah. I could spend, I can too.
How can we position this, and how can we, relate this to healing from trauma, as far as, finding out who we were, who we are, making the right decisions. When we're coming from a place of trauma, we're not necessarily completely cognizant of the decisions that we're making.
No, we're not. We're definitely not. I do feel like, for me, part of my healing process was finding out who I am, because I really didn't know. I was so lost in being everything to everyone else, being that proverbial doormat, just putting up with more and more, tolerating stuff that I should never have tolerated. And my experience, the longer that we tolerate it for, the worse it gets, and the impact on us becomes greater. And for me personally, I can only speak for myself, right? With authority. For me, I know that there is still an element of trauma that lives inside of me, and that, is always present, I think. It's whether sometimes that comes out in unexpected ways, and sometimes we can really stand in who we are. Sometimes for me, recently I was at an event with people who have impacted me negatively in the past and caused trauma in my life. And I found that my body was reacting to their energy in ways that surprised me and took me back to, well, this is actually the state that I lived in for many years. So I think, and yet I could still stand strong and be who I am in that situation.
You were able to recognize what was happening because you know who you are now.
And to not put, like in the past, I would have responded differently to what my body was reacting, right? I would have gone down that rabbit hole. In that moment, I was able to reclaim who I am and stand strong in that and be myself in that situation.
How do we, I mean, there's so many layers to us. So, how do we start going through and sifting through those layers? Finding those limiting beliefs that we have and just really uncovering who it is that we are.
One little piece at a time. It is a matter of, you're right, we are so many layers. And what I'm really saying with that last little piece is I don't know if we ever complete this process. I think it's a healing process and we become more ourselves through it. We become stronger through it. I mean, we are who we are because of the trauma we went through. That doesn't justify the trauma. We can use that experience to help others. One of the reasons I do what I do is to help other women and other people heal from trauma and become themselves in an easier way than I was able to, right? If I can help even one person do that, then I feel good, right? How can we, I'm not sure that I've answered your question.
I think you did. One, basically one layer at a time.
Yeah.
You just have to kind of peel back one layer at a time. Yeah, that was a perfect answer.
And I think too, I really feel like it's a matter of the big piece of that. When we find a layer and a limiting belief, and is this really true? This is how this is what people have said about me. This is how people have treated me. Whatever that looks like in that layer we've discovered, is that true? Is that how I deserve to be treated? And how can I choose differently in the future? It's about really just acknowledging that is what's happening for us. And do we still continue to believe that? Do we choose to keep believing that?
And that's where those empowered decisions come in.
Yes. Like we can be told as children, well, you're no good, you're this, you're that, you're whatever you are, whatever labels are put on us. And we can choose now, when we become aware of that again as adults. Is that true? Now, is that real? Do I choose to believe that anymore? Because those beliefs didn't come from us. They were put on us by other people.
Right. Is that really my belief, or is that somebody else's belief?
And it's also recognizing that we didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, that's the hard one.
Yeah.
It wasn't our fault. Whatever happened to us, didn't happen because of us.
Yes, and we didn't cause it. And so many times we're told that it is our fault, that we deserved it, that whatever. And I know that was a big one for me, was actually, that takes a lot of courage to actually let go of that, because that becomes, for me, that was so ingrained in me.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I grew up hearing how stupid I was all the time, and lack of worth and all of that. So it was very ingrained within me as well. And letting go is difficult. I say is, not was, because I'm still in that process. Because it is who I identified as for so long. And now I'm trying to figure out, who am I without all of this other baggage?
Yes, I hear you. And one key thing in there too is when we choose to let go of those limiting beliefs, when we choose to let go of, for me, one big one was, well, you're no good, nothing you say is of any value. you're not worth listening to, all that kind of stuff. And we can choose to not believe those anymore. It's really important to replace it with something else, because nature abhors a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is that if we are not replacing that with something positive, then the old beliefs will just appear again, because
Very
that's
true.
our default.
Very true. That is, yeah, that's the default. That's what we're used to. That's what we're comfortable with, that uncomfortable comfort zone.
It's what we know.
Yeah.
It's and so it is that process of moment by moment. Do I choose to believe that? What am I now believing? You know? And for me, there's so many ways that we can do that. And the more ways that we infiltrate ourselves with those new beliefs that we're choosing, you know, whether it's a poster on our wall or words on our mirror, or something we record on our phone and hit the button and listen to when we're in one of those moments, you know, whatever ways we choose to affirm ourselves and recode ourselves, really. Because what we're doing is creating new beliefs in ourselves. And because those old ones have been there for so long, you know, for me, they come right from a little child, and layer upon layer over decades, that's a lot of relearning to do, unlearning and relearning that to do. Like, this is not easy.
No, and it's not overnight.
No.
That's for sure.
It's an ongoing process, and it's really important to have support, you know, to choose who you have around you is another really empowering decision. You know, do we still choose to have contact with those people who have had those negative influences over us? Some of them it's hard not to. We can put boundaries in amongst that. So that's another really important piece of those empowering decisions, is how much of that person will I allow in my life? How can I do that in a way that's safe for me, you know?
Absolutely. I had to make those decisions. I had to remove my very toxic, abusive stepmother from my home last year. I was her caretaker. And I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't allow it because I had gotten to the point where she couldn't affect me personally. She went after my kids mentally, and did the same thing that she did to me growing up, you know. And I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't have that negativity in my home. And it was a very hard decision, but it was very empowering. It was very freeing. You know, it was healing, because that had been such a part of my trauma growing up, was dealing with that manipulation and emotional abuse.
Huge decision to make. Well done, you.
It was a big decision to make, and it was much needed, but I think we're both happier now that we aren't speaking. So you know my point is those decisions, while they're big, they're super important, because that's part of our self-care and taking care of us first.
Absolutely. And here's the thing too that really trapped me for a lot of years was I had this misconception, and I have no idea where it came from, that for me to have experienced trauma, I had to have physical evidence of it. And that kept me trapped for a very long time. One particular person, when I confronted them numerous times, and I'm going decades now over the emotional, mental, psychological, all of that kind of abuse that was coming at me every moment, really. The response I got was, well, there's no point telling anyone, because they'll just think you're crazy. They won't believe you. And so I
Right.
then, and when I looked at that objectively, it was feasible that that would happen, because the abuse only happened when there was nobody else around.
Mhm.
It was, and that kept me trapped for a very long time.
Yes, I can understand that.
And like I
There's
say, because I never had any physical evidence, I felt like I couldn't go anywhere for help.
right. Yeah, you couldn't say, look at the bruises, look at the cuts, look at the black eyes. You didn't
Yeah.
have those. Those were internal, and
Yes.
you can't show those to people.
And in some ways, those, they hurt for longer because no one else can see them.
hmm I say all the time, the physical trauma can go away, can heal. You may be left with physical scars, but it's healed. The emotional trauma lasts for years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, until we choose to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Daphne, for coming on to the summit and talking to us about these decisions, making empowered decisions, and the fact that it really begins with finding out who we are. I think that's just such an important piece of healing our trauma. So I really appreciate and value your wisdom and insight.
Well, thank you for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity to share, because it's really important for people to know that it's not their fault, that they can change it, and
Mhm.
that getting to know yourself and who you are provides evidence that all of that stuff isn't true, that we've believed.
Absolutely.
For
Right.
me, it's huge.
Yes. Yes. It's been very big for me as well. So
Thank you
thank
for the
you.
opportunity to share.
It's my pleasure. And listeners, thank you for joining us. We'll talk to you in one of the next sessions.